Hello, everyone. What you're about to hear is a Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace retrospective review with special guests JDub and Boop of the Nerdherder podcast, my good friends John and Cooper Wilcox. I made the mistake of referring to my friend Cooper Wilcox as Connor during this episode. I referred to them as Connor. Now, I had completely blanked because normally I refer to my good friend Boop as just Boop. I normally do not refer to them by their given names. And their name is actually Cooper. Cooper, not Connor. Now, the reason I mention this is because my friend Cooper is going through a transition in their life where they have embraced the identity that they are most comfortable with and the identity that they feel best represents them. And the reason why I mention that I made a mistake here is I want to be very, very respectful and honor and the understanding of the identity of my friend. And by understanding, what I mean is I want to make sure that I am always referring to my friend by the name that they are most comfortable with. Now, I made a minor mistake by saying Connor instead of Cooper. And I have apologized. If this bothers any of the listeners, I just want you to know I am sorry for the mistake. And I did apologize to Cooper, saying, sorry, I called you Connor. I'm not sure why my brain thought that the name that they were most comfortable with is Connor. When I think my brain was having a Mandela effect. When in actuality, the name that they go by is Cooper. So the reason I wanted to mention this is I want to be respectful and make sure that I refer to them by the correct name because that matters to them. And as their friend, it matters to me. So yes, whenever I say Connor, I should be saying Cooper. So I apologize for the faux pas. Without further ado, here is my episode with John and Cooper Wilcox of the Nerdherder podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tate's Turn They Were Not. I'm Brendan Marr, that noisy hearings my ventilator. In this particular episode of Tate's Turn They Were Not, yet again, the guests awaken. Returning to the show, you know them, you love them. John and Cooper Wilcox, also known as JDub and Boop, from the Nerdherder podcast. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you for having us. Always happy to hang out.
Yep. You guys were on, I think, in April.
Yeah.
We had a fascinating conversation, and we will reference that conversation today. The
Absolutely.
Book of Judges part.
Right.
We'll get to that part, which is fun. But
Absolutely.
before we started recording, I noticed that Connor had a Garrick shirt.
You.
And that filled me with so much joy. Because Deep Space Nine is life.
Much agreed.
Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, we're not here to talk about Deep Space Nine as much as.
Not yet.
Maybe once you guys finish it, we can have an
We
in-depth
would
conversation.
We would love that.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take the Phantom Menace, and we've talked endlessly about it, but we're going to review it. We're going to do a retrospective review. And I must admit, I have to confess, the last time they did a review of the Phantom Menace was about 12 years ago. I'm ashamed of that recording. Because I had gotten on the bandwagon of everybody else complaining about it. And ever since then, I'm like, nah. So this will be definitely a different tone of review than the last time I did a review of this. So we're going to break it down into 6 categories: story, characters, screenplay, themes, music, and spectacle. And never mind my niece screaming out in the hallway. She's 3. It's just
Exactly.
So we're gonna break each category down. So without further ado, let's jump in, and I think I want to start with: do you remember the first time that you saw the Phantom Menace?
Ooh.
Or were you too young to remember?
I think yours is much more interesting than mine, so I'll go first. So I was a kid who was raised on sci-fi because my dad, a consummate lover of all things. Like I was raised on Star Trek. I was raised on Star Wars to slightly lesser degree. But one of my earliest memories is popping in the Phantom Menace VHS tape and not having a single clue what was going on.
Wow.
That we were a family who we watched a lot of movies together. So we watched as many of the Star Wars films as were out at the time. I was born in 1995, so I was about 5.
You made me feel old.
Yeah, I have that effect on people. I was about 4 when the movie came out, so I was way too young to really understand what was going on. And of course, my dad, being the fan of sci-fi, he took my brothers to see it in the theaters. I didn't get to go because I was too young, and I've never forgiven him for that. Fine, because I got to see it in theaters a few months ago. But yeah, that was. I have a lot of memories of just popping in the VHS tape and being like, movie. I see. And my appreciation for it has definitely grown as I've gotten older.
Yes, the old slip-cover VHS tape.
Yes.
The one that I watched to death. That's why I had the movie memorized.
Same.
So JDub, so apparently your story, at least according to your partner, is more interesting. So how so?
I think mainly just because the memory of seeing it for the first time is so unequivocally ingrained in me. Because I definitely remember the first time I saw it. It was in theaters. I had fallen in love with Star Wars, was a big fan, and so as an early birthday present, my mom decided that we would go see it together. Because we didn't go to the theater a lot, but when we did, it was for something significant, something we both would enjoy. It was a whole day's ordeal, and so that was very much that. And it was back in the day when there was a little bit some movies still get some effort in theaters, but yeah, it's very selective. But back then, it always felt like when these movies were coming out, it was a takeover. And at the theater in Savannah, it was no different. They had a bunch of merchandise, big displays. I like when you walked in, it was like the only thing they were showing could have been Star Wars. You would have believed that Star Wars was all over the theater. And so, growing up in a pseudo military home, we were ingrained to always be early. And so, with the time, I remember we shopped around and everything. I bought the Jabba the Hutt hollow figure that came with the slime. And it was my first Jabba the Hutt ever, and I was so happy. And then we went and we saw it, and I just remember, because that was the first Star Wars I got to see in theaters. I missed out on the originals, obviously,
because you're only a year older than I am,
right? And we didn't get to see the special editions until they were out. Yes, and so Star Wars Episode 1 was my first Star Wars theater experience, and I think it was perfect for it because I think it's a great theater movie. And I think when COVID was happening, a lot of people had this conversation about, movies not being viewed well enough on home media. And I do agree there's a difference for some movies, but it doesn't mean it can't work in both. Like, we watch The Phantom Menace now once a week, and I've lost no zeal for it,
sometimes multiple times a week.
That's the most wonderful thing I've ever heard.
Yeah. But there's parts and pieces of The Phantom Menace that are definitely bigger and better on the screen. And so, like, I would say
Duel of the Fates, those kind of things.
Oh yeah. And so I definitely would argue it's one of the best, if not the best, Star Wars to see in theaters, and to have that experience with if you had to choose one. It's my favorite, so I'm partial, but I don't know. When Lucas was making his movies before, he was just making his movies to tell his stories. I think what we all recognize is with Episode 1 and with the prequels, now that Lucas knew the industry, he knew the kind of things and the work he had to do. He knew what behind the scenes had to get pulled off, and what ultimately kind of experience this would be. And I think the Phantom Menace, of all of them, got the red carpet treatment of, this is special, this is important. We've got to make the moment they touch their butts to the seats and watch this movie the most special moment of a Star Wars fan's life. And it didn't work for everybody, but it worked for me.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd heard some rumors and rumblings that there were people that didn't make it.
Right.
I don't know, some weird corner of the fandom. I don't know.
Who cares what
I love that. I love that is becoming the truth, though. I love that I see less and less Phantom Menace hate than I ever have in my life.
The more we get rid of the red letter media and honest trailers takes, the better the world will be.
100%. So yeah, that's one of as Inside Out would say, my core memories.
Yes.
It's special to me.
It reminds me, Inside Out 2, which my brother-in-law worked on, is coming out this week.
Really?
Very cool.
Yeah, if you stay during the end credits, when it comes to the story team, Jeff Call. That's my brother-in-law. And when you get to the production babies, you see Ivy Shannon Call. That's my niece.
Nice.
That's pretty
who
cool.
is the cutest thing ever. She is, and I'm determined to get her into Star Wars.
Only a matter.
Just as I've done with the other kids.
Of course.
That's so awesome, dude.
So, I don't remember the first time I saw this. That's the weird thing. I was 13, but I just don't remember seeing it. And so, not to belabor the point, I know I watched the VHS to death. I saw the movie in the theater once. I liked it a lot. And then as I got older, I started to hear those negative voices and started to go, yeah, they must be right. And a few years ago, thanks to our friend Ken Knapsack, Joseph Scrimshaw, and Jennifer Landa, I went, wait a minute. I've always loved this. Why am I pretending?
Mm.
But yeah, I'm sad that I don't remember the exact moment seeing it. But I think the experience of seeing a Star Wars film on a big screen. Because I had seen the re-release, the special editions. But seeing a new Star Wars film that I'd never seen on the big screen was such a magnificent moment that it almost becomes just ubiquitous, for lack of a better word. It just is. It just exists.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I don't remember the first moment, I think it became it just exists kind of moment.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine what it was like before.
Mhm.
Right.
Anyhow, so we're gonna jump in first with the story. Now I've discovered over the years, thanks to the help of our good buddy Alvin Diaz, that there is a difference between plot and story.
Mhm.
And sometimes people get them mixed up. Just because something doesn't add to the plot doesn't mean it doesn't add to the story. Which is why I always reject the filler word
Mhm.
for episodes.
Yep.
They call Bad Batch filler. I'm like, you're not paying attention.
Exactly.
So the plot of the film, Green Amidala must get to Coruscant to plead the case for people who are under invasion. That's the plot, pretty much. The story, on the other hand, is bigger and wilder than that. And it's interesting how the structure of the story is that we don't really have a main character per se. But you could argue that Qui-Gon is the main character. But it's interesting. So you have a kind of Act 1 with the invasion and the Jedi trying to stop it. Or trying to negotiate, but that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You get that whole opening act of them meeting Jar Jar and meeting the Gungans and presenting what I think is the thesis statement of the movie. You and the Naboo form a symbiont circle. What happens to one of you will affect the others. The other. And if anyone out there wants to know more, I would say check out our friend Scotty J. Rowe's brilliant video essay on the midichlorians.
It won't be.
So we have Act 1. We had Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, meet the Gungans, get to the Queen. They escape the planet. That's Act 1. Well, because their hyperdrive is damaged, Act 2 takes us to Tatooine. And I don't care what anyone says, I will never get tired of Tatooine. Where, of course, we meet Anakin Skywalker. And then Act 3 takes us to Coruscant, and both the Jedi Order and the Republic are useless.
Essentially.
So our heroes have to go back and do it for themselves, but are able to convince the Gungans to join them. So it's a lot of story because it goes all over the place. The Pod Race is its own story. Duel of the Fates is its own story. I mean, we could go on and on, but so kind of in a nutshell, we'll start with you, Connor. What do you think about the story and the plot of this film as a whole?
Ooh, I am a sucker for the classic like fantasy wizard in the cave, hero's journey type story. And I love that this is kind of it. I mean, that's, you could argue what A New Hope is. It's the basic Luke finds Obi-Wan, who is the wizard in the cave, gets sent on this magic journey. All of this stuff. That's also a video essay by Scotty J. Ray you can watch for the Heroes. Basically, just go to Scotty if you want to know more about.
Scotty and Jerry were just on my show, and they are the most awesome people ever.
Oh yeah, very awesome, big thinkers.
I mean, you guys are the most awesome people ever, but you know.
No, stop it.
Oh,
yeah, it's
takes one to know one.
Yeah, agreed. It's one of those stories where it's kind of like this is the setting up of the dominoes that are about to fall.
Yeah.
It's a prequel in the truest sense of it's setting up so much that we already know is going to come to pass, but it does so much to make sure that it's told in a way that is interesting as well as being meaningful. And like there's so many like meaningful moments in this movie. Like there's the last scene with Shmi and Anakin look back being one of the last things she tells him. That's so emotionally damaging, and will kind of inform the character that he becomes for the rest of his, where he continues to look back and cannot help but look back. Yeah, but it's one of those classical stories that I don't think that I'll ever get tired of hearing.
Well said. I think it is very classic in that sense. It is very much a pure story of the hero's journey. And also, if you're familiar with the films of Akira Kurosawa, the original draft of the original Star Wars film that George Lucas wrote is much similar to Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress. He didn't end up using those ideas, but he does recycle them in Phantom Menace. The idea of the princess going in disguise. The idea of needing to cross enemy lines to get somewhere. Anyhow, things like that. And it is a very pure hero's journey type story where, yes, we've seen this before in the original film. This is very different than that. While still retaining some of the same blocks. John, what do you think about the story and plot here?
I mean, a lot of what's already been said, for sure, that I agree with. It's interesting and tough, though, because my thoughts on the story are complicated in that I believe that this is one of the most well-formed stories in general, and I mean specifically to episode 1. And it's not a hierarchy or a class or a quality thing. I don't mean it's better than Titanic or better than A New Hope or
better than Titanic.
Yeah, well, yes, but I mean though, that I think in general a lot of movies, even Star Wars movies, take a very solid grasp of a single journey, and that's what we get in the film, and that's not bad. That's perfectly fine. Technically, the Phantom Menace does that, but whereas I would see a lot of movies and a lot of the execution of them being one point connected to another point by a single line, the Phantom Menace, kind of like you broke down, is more of like a chain link. It's stories within a story. The story of the Phantom Menace is made up of multiple stories. And for example, like I do agree. I think that we're meant to be most comfortable seeing the plot through Qui-Gon's eyes as the main character, but I think that what's done very well here is that so many characters feel like the main character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because so many characters are given their story. You've got Jar Jar from bumbling buffoon to actually helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the Queen from cold and rigid and married to policy to the maybe the government isn't as strong as the people it serves. You can get as simple even as the nature versus machine. You've got these are the rules and that's how the Jedi should be. And then Obi-Wan opening up to maybe there's room for things not fitting in a category. Like on and on and on it goes. But there's so many stories within the story. But I think that's the point, is because it is a symbiosis. I don't know what George Lucas and Rick McCallum smoked when they were coming up with this. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like the idea of two being one and one affecting the other is everywhere in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And it can only come from somebody who's just obsessed with that symbiosis. You've got so many details. Obviously, the master and the apprentice, the idea that there's always two, the master and the apprentice. You've got the twin engines of the pod racer. You've got Sabe and Amidala.
Yeah.
There's two of them.
This is getting out of hand. No, there are two of them.
I really encourage everyone who would listen to this episode to go back and watch The Phantom Menace and think about duality, think about symbiosis. You will see it everywhere.
Think about
yeah.
The politics of the Senate versus the politics of Naboo.
Yeah. And so it's just one of those things where lightning in a bottle, maybe George just had peace and quiet and was able to just pump out an amazing story. I don't know how it happened, but I think they managed to come up with a story that is both complete and incomplete, because it is a prequel. It is episode 1, but it is also everything that follows does again and is also done because of, if that makes sense. It's the complete story of Star Wars, but it also has the ripple effects to more Star Wars. It's just it's really interesting. It's obviously something that's fascinated me and I've thought about since seeing it for the first time. And it's the benefit of watching this movie like 700 times. You just, maybe I'm making it up, maybe I'm seeing things that aren't there, but I see a story that is interestingly both a building block and the building itself. So.
That's very well played. Yeah, the whole symbiosis thing. But you're right. The story is designed not to be your standard storytelling. It's very much here's the story, here's the story, here's the story. And the fact that they're all connected is just a continuation of the symbiosis idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's really what I think George is trying to say to some degree, is that all these events connect to each other. So everything we do has repercussions beyond just us. And people outside of us, what they do has repercussions on us.
Absolutely.
Whether it be one of these bad laws being passed or Supreme Court making extremely stupid decisions. down to just the average interaction of everyday people, where we do something either good or bad that affects somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
There is that symbiosis in society, and I think George is hitting it on the head. In 1999, when nobody was even thinking about that.
Right.
The economy was good. There was a dot-com boom. Nobody realized what was going to happen 2 years later.
Yeah.
Yep. And we see it repeated more and more and more in real life,
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. But now we come to the meat of the movie, that's what we love the most. And that's the characters.
Absolutely.
Now, because there's so many, it would take forever to discuss them all.
Yes.
Let's really quick talk about the supporting cast of minor characters, for example. And if I call them minor and you're listening and you go, I love that guy, I don't mean minor in that they're not important. I mean minor in the amount of screen time. This would include Watto and Sebulba.
Right.
And Theo Bibble and Chancellor Valorum and Boss Nass and I would say Shmi Skywalker, but I think that might be underselling her. Characters like Captain Panaka maybe doesn't get enough love.
For sure.
The list could go on and on of these more minor characters. Newt Gunray and the other Nemoidians. So I wanted to start with just in general, with that supporting cast of interesting characters. And because it's Star Wars, we love all the supporting side characters.
Right.
Absolutely.
But in order just to keep the podcast from going too long, what are your thoughts? I'll start with you, John, about this marvelous, colorful cast of minor supporting characters who have now become beloved.
Yeah, like I like that there's more scale than I think there's ever been in Star Wars. It's just a benefit of more money, more production time, more staff, But I think also, obviously, the production crew understood by this point that fans are going to look for these characters and make them their personality for the next 30 years.
Aura Singh appears for like 1 second, everyone loves her.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's a way to do it wrong by being too intentional, but I don't think that happened here. I think there's so many, and that for me, that's why I think this movie is so comforting still all these years later, is because I never run out of characters to enjoy.
I mean, the pod racers alone, that's great.
Right. And that's a big thing. Is so I know I make a lot of comparisons, and I hope your listeners don't take that the wrong way. But
no.
You should.
For instance, and just because it's relevant with the HasLab project they just announced, let's take the cantina scene. There's lots of great characters. There's lots of interesting looking characters. I would say retroactively, over a longer period of time, they have gotten more interesting. But in general, they don't really stand out, or at least they don't stand out immediately.
A few of them do, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's the couple that are obviously center scope that you're supposed to.
He doesn't like you.
Exactly. But and again, it doesn't mean I don't like those characters. It just means that they take time to grow. I love every one of the pod race pilots. I've loved them since day one. They're all just big characters, like design, sound, characteristics, like they're just so memorable. And it helps too to have the guiding soundtrack, or not soundtrack, but the guiding commentary of the
Foden bead.
Indeed. Yeah.
See, see,
I
not
write
just
questions for a trivia show.
not just actors can forget stuff. Am I right?
Don't even go there. I had that argument with somebody yesterday.
But yeah, and it's not to say it happens every time. Not every character stands out in the bar scene in Attack of the Clones. It's not a perfect rule, but I don't know. I love how much it feels like a bunch of characters that a crew stayed up late drawing pictures of and goofing off about and giggling at. Can we really do this guy? Can we really have an alien named Ben? Can we really do why not?
Ben Quadranaris.
That's all head and just arms and legs.
Exactly. That's why his design is my favorite.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I love it. That's what I mean by not having. I don't run out of characters to. No matter what mood I'm in, I can always find someone in the Phantom Menace that I just latch onto and quote and cheer for, and gets all my attention and affection. And then the next time I watch it, it'll be different.
Yeah.
It's just there's no shortage of points of focus with characters.
It's very much like Return of the Jedi, in that now that George had established this universe, he was really able to populate it with a bunch of memorable minor characters. Whereas, as you say in the Cantina, I mean, we know a lot of their names.
Mm-hmm.
And there are legend stories about them that I don't think that there are a bunch of fans saying, Cade is my favorite character.
Yeah.
The little, where she is.
The little bat-faced,
yeah.
it's F, doesn't it?
I can't believe I'm blanking on the Star Wars champ and I'm forgetting.
We'll remember.
We'll remember in a minute.
Exactly.
But whereas you jump to something like Phantom Menace and Return of the Jedi, I mean, Chris Nadine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone loves Chris Nadine. You'll know that.
Mahonic.
And then you go to people like Mahonic and Odie Mandrell.
Mm-hmm.
And there goes Ben Quadranaris Tower Coupler,
Well, and even when we get to the senators in in the later act, like
on Frita, yeah,
yeah, and I think that's the difference, because whereas they were very much a part of the set but not the focus in the Cantina, you don't at any moment feel like, gosh, we're missing the plot because they're announcing a 9th pod race pilot. But they take everybody gets a second, everybody gets a beat, and it does feel that way. I will agree, like, my original Cantina scene was Jabba's palace, that opening scene. Like I
mean,
remember,
Ula and Sliced Noodles and Max Rebo and
I mean,
Ruthie McCool and
yes,
the
and that,
man.
it's just like those were the ones for me as a kid where I was just like instant classic.
Oh, and Ethan Munn and Hermione and a man.
And you're right,
I mean, great sidekick.
Such a cool design. Clearly, just a prop.
Good Tortuna, of course.
Exactly.
Good Tortuna.
Yes. So just helping, make my point sound less biased. It's just that I think giving each character a second, and rather than just having them in the background, and this is, I think, just a practice of film in general, is so for instance, Transformers 2007, love that movie. There's so many side characters that get funny little moments that are so unnecessary, but because of that, I remember them. I remember the guy with the Xbox that came alive. I remember the girl that, the Valley girl. Did he just dent my car? It's like, did we need that? No, but they did it, and I can't forget those characters.
Yeah.
Did we need to know all of the pilots? No, because the only one that really matters is Anakin. But
Wow.
we know them.
Because it adds to the story of this,
Exactly.
like, well, obviously it adds to the story of Tatooine as a planet.
Right.
Being like a watering hole for all these different alien species.
Mm-hmm.
But it adds to the fact that we're dealing with a big universe here.
Oh, yeah.
And we're dealing also with the underworld, this idea that these pod racers racing for money for whatever they need. Because the Republic is not really doing anything out there.
Right.
Slavery, the Republic's not even there on Tatooine.
Oh yeah. Well,
Because the Hutts have too much power and things like that.
And a story within a story. That's the lesson for Padme about Tatooine. That's part of what changes her mind.
Yeah.
She goes from seeing savages and ruthless, law-breaking people to people doing what they need to do to survive, because people like her aren't doing their job. And I don't mean her specifically, but people with her position.
And then she goes to Coruscant and sees that people in her position are doing nothing.
Exactly. It's just like the Republic's anti-slavery laws. That Tatooine could be right next door to Coruscant, and it still wouldn't change a thing.
Yep. No, I mean, you're right. I mean, and having all these great side characters not only does it expand the palette, but it also gives you a window into this is what's going on. It's going to eventually lead to where we know it's going to lead. So now we come into some of the main characters. So we'll start. I didn't want to include Shmi in the side characters because I think that she's more important than that. So I wanted to talk about her because I think she is one of the best parts that nobody talks about in this movie. Pernilla August, the great Danish actress. No, she's Swedish. I've been in a lot of films with Ingmar Bergman and stuff like that. Oddly enough, had played the mother of Jesus in a movie.
Right. Preparing her for the role.
and then she plays this role. And in order to not, delay ourselves too much, I wanted to just quickly go over the fact that her journey is very interesting because she knows that her son deserves better than what she can give. And she knows that he is this compassionate kid. She's obviously taught him very well. And even though they're slaves, they really made something out of themselves in terms of really still maintaining that positive attitude. And I think that Shmi's journey of needing to let her son go is really extraordinary, I think, because the idea in her mind that he needs something better and this is his chance. And even if I can't go with him, this is something he needs. And we definitely see that parents do this often, which is I'm willing to put aside my needs for my kid and do that. And so I think that also the fact that I wanted to point this out, but is there something romantic going on with Qui-Gon Jinn?
Yes.
What do you think?
I choose to watch it that way for sure.
If he hadn't died, I'm pretty sure he would have swung back on Tatooine and just like, okay, let's go. On his way to take Anakin somewhere.
So, just really quickly, just your thoughts on her story, which I think is actually at the heart of this movie, even if she's not talked about, because Anakin's separation from his mom is going to have a big deal. But also the idea of change versus not changing. He says you can't stop the change from happening even more than you can stop the sun from setting.
Mhm.
And he says, I don't want things to change, which, as we know, that tragic flaw ends up being his downfall.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Shmi and Anakin and all this stuff?
I talked a lot last time, so I'll let you.
Wow. I think you hit the nail on the head, is that this relationship is it's not the cause of Anakin's downfall by any stretch of the imagination, but like his relationship with his mother was so important to him and so like close that of course he's going to hold on to that for the rest of his life because he spent so much time with her. Like he is not the normal Jedi Padawan where they're either taken at birth or very, very young. Like he had a mom to teach him how to regulate his emotions. Tried to teach him. Yeah, we'll get into that much later. But like, yeah, I think that is the heart of the story. Is like this kid she knows is special. I think I'm of the controversial opinion. I think that Shmi was at least a little bit force sensitive.
I think so too.
She had some, but I think she knew that eventually she was going to have to give this kid up, whether that's, in any way, I think she knew something was going to happen.
I just thought of the biblical comparison. Hannah and Samuel. Hannah prays for a son and says, I will devote him to the service of God if you let me have a child.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially what Shmi does with Anakin.
Exactly.
And John, do you have any additional thoughts on Shmi really quick?
All that's been said for sure. And then I like the parallel. We see it more clearly in episode 2, but the reason Shmi is so important, I think, for me, is because she's a reflection of who Anakin would be in his last moments. Because this idea of, if I could go with you, I would, but I can't. But you have to go, is essentially, without the words, what happened between Vader and Luke on the second Death Star. The idea of Anakin in episode 2 saying, that I've got to save you. I've got to get you out of here. You have to live. But she says, no, I'm complete.
Yeah.
Like, it's all reflected in Vader's, you've already saved me. Like, you did what you needed to do. Now I need you to go. And so Shmi's definitely, for me, an echoing character, because it's like, okay, it's special and important here. I'm a mama's boy, but also it's special and important here and here and here. And it's something that keeps going throughout the story of Anakin for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Let's talk about 2 characters that maybe don't get enough screen time. But thankfully later we're made into more interesting characters through the animation. And that would be Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Maul. I wanted to talk about the 2 of them together because I think that Obi-Wan doesn't really get as much screen time as he, I don't want to use the word deserves, but he's definitely a supporting character in this.
Yeah.
And in the next 2 prequels, he becomes like a main character.
For sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think you're right, though. I think what we thought he deserved, Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Jedi. It was.
So we sort of see him taking a back seat. He has a few moments of good wisdom about the Symbiont Circle. And also Obi-Wan learning to accept quote-unquote pathetic life forms. Which eventually he grows in that, thank goodness.
Yeah, not one of his finer moments.
and then his counterpart, Darth Maul. Now, Maul doesn't really get much to do in this movie other than look cool and fight cool.
And he does.
And that's about it. Thank goodness for the Clone Wars.
Absolutely.
And our hero, Sam Witwer, for making the character one of my favorite characters in Star Wars.
Absolutely.
So let's look at that, just the two of them together, the apprentices. They're both sort of kind of minor characters in this story. Obviously, they get the climactic duel at the end. But so what do we think about these two apprentices and their respective journeys? Connor, start with you.
I think I've said so exhaustively at this point that it was initially a joke, but it's not a joke anymore. Obi-Wan and Maul are a dyad, like in my mind.
Yeah, okay, true.
Like
I mean, you know,
think their journey together, it does so much for the story of the Clone Wars, like you said. And
oh my word, yes.
like they are such an interesting mirror of each other.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's a very good point.
Because you get this absolute, jerk who he thinks of nothing but the order of things. And they are both very order oriented, but through two completely different, thought bubbles. Thought bubbles? That's not what I meant to say. You get it. Like, Obi-Wan is obsessed with the Order of the Jedi, and Maul is obsessed with the Order of the Sith. So them butting heads is always going to be a really interesting, moment. But in the end, I think they do kind of do what they were always supposed to do, I guess. Like with Obi-Wan winning and avenging his master, and Maul not being able to take his master's place, as is apparently, what he's supposed to do. He completely whiffs it and gets shafted.
But literally.
Who's to say if he really lost in the end.
I mean, I think you're right about the parallel between these two, because I gotta tell you, their story is told in the Clone Wars and Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. It's tragic and beautiful.
Absolutely. It's
beautiful because Maul does everything he can to break Obi-Wan, and he never does. But Maul's end actually ends up being rather sad.
Mm-hmm.
That's the guy who couldn't give up. Now, within the context of Phantom Menace, these two characters are maybe not the most interesting, but will become interesting as the series goes along.
Exactly.
John, your thoughts on the two apprentices?
Again, I definitely agree pretty much with everything you guys, not pretty much. I agree with what you guys have said. Because I've always definitely seen it as and in support of they're a dyad. I do believe the case can be made that they are definitely intertwined characters, because I agree. I feel like they start at the same point as being little more than instruments of their respective orders.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Obi-Wan struggles with making decisions in the moment, making decisions on a whim and a feeling.
He's like, but Master Yoda says,
right.
Dismiss.
His decisions are informed, which is good, but it's very much, wait, let me check the rule book. And Maul is honestly not that different.
So Obi-Wan is basically the Yord of this particular story.
Very much so. Yep. Very, very much carries the Book of Jedi rules in his pocket.
Now, does he look as good without his shirt on as Yord does? I wonder.
At that point in time, yes.
Okay.
I would say yes.
Scrawny,
we watched Velvet Goldmine.
Yeah, I saw that and I regretted it.
So, I will say, we do have to reference ancillary media, which to some people means that it's not good because you have to read something else or whatnot. Maul, Age of the Republic is a really good issue. Maul, Son of Dathomir is a very good issue.
Oh, yes.
That helps give character to the three line speaking guy we see in episode 1, in that he has also given everything for the Sith, the way that they believe. And so they start at the same point, and basically what we see happen is, instead of just going straight away from each other, further and further apart, they basically go away from each other, but almost in a circle, until they come
it
right.
It's like a DNA strand almost.
Yeah, exactly. They keep coming back together, and ultimately, I feel like Obi-Wan obviously doesn't end where Maul ends, but saying that that is a close of a chapter for Obi-Wan, they both end in a point of hope, but from completely different perspectives. Like you mentioned, tragically, Maul's hope is still revenge. It's still that Luke will be their revenge.
Exactly.
Whereas Obi-Wan, his hope is that Luke will be their redemption. They're both right. So effectively, yeah, like they keep coming back together, interweaving until finally ending at the same point that, hey, the chosen one, in their mind, Luke, is our only hope. And so, I could have never predicted. I just thought he was cool. I just thought it was amazing. The acrobats, the double lightsaber, the face, the tattoo, like, he was so cool. And now he's cool, but with reason.
Yep, so, and I've gotten to meet Sam Witwer, and that was awesome.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful man. Wonderful.
I had him sign a picture of their last duel that they have in Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then I come to Jar Jar Binks. Now, apparently some people didn't like him. I don't know. I heard rumors about that. But, hey, okay, here we are on the death of Jar Jar Binks. A huge technological leap forward in terms of how they did it. Now, this is a character that I struggled with for a while. Not because he was goofy and weird, but I thought he added nothing to the story. Until I realized that story and plot are not the same thing. Now, he does add to the plot by basically being the reason Amidala sides with the Gungans. But he doesn't really add much to the plot, per se. He just goes along with the journey. But as far as the story is concerned, we know that the Naboo and the Gungans have problems with each other. We know Amidala finally gets to spend time with a Gungan and gets to see that they're more similar than they are different. Getting the idea that the Gungans have an army, maybe if we convince them to join us, but also Jar Jar being a friend to Anakin, and they form a bond rather quickly. And even though he kind of drives Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon crazy, the fact that he connects with basically 2 children, Amidala, because she's only 13, and Anakin. He's sort of very much kind of the goofy uncle that you like.
Yeah.
That's the uncle I try to be, at least. But I think that Jar Jar is one of those characters that was misunderstood for a long time. Because he really gives us an insight into the quote-unquote lesser beings of the galaxy, the ones who maybe the average person is like, oh, those people. Yeah. And we've certainly seen plenty of that in our society, of the marginalized group. And so he kind of represents that marginalized character, and also represents this idea of innocence in a way. This is what they're fighting for. This is what's being stepped on throughout the course of Star Wars, is the innocence of these simple, he's a very simple guy. And even his own people are kind of stepping on him. And so he kind of represents to me the marginalized character, and getting to be quote unquote humanized by the whole. If you just get to know people who are like that, you would lose some of your prejudice. I have a cousin who thinks Muslims are pretty awful people. That's what they think.
Mm.
Considering where the person lives, I don't think they've ever met a Muslim.
Mm.
And so, like, it's easy not to like people when you've never met them.
100%.
Jar Jar is the one that they get to meet and go, oh, now I understand these people.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, I mean, we could spend a whole podcast talking about Jar Jar. And I know you guys don't have all the time in the world today.
Mhm.
So really quickly, just thoughts on Jar Jar. Just what do you got?
Love him. Big
Yes,
fan.
big fan in this house.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you about everything you said. Like you said, he's at the bare minimum, even if you don't think he's funny, you can recognize that he is the allegory for the normal person.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy literally smelling the flowers when this war comes to his planet.
Mhm.
You know, he, like you say, he goes along for the ride, but it's really just more like, I mean, what choice does he really have? What choice is he really given, considering the circumstances?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a very pure character because he never loses his innocence.
Exactly.
Right, and that's the big thing is
And that's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
He's largely not on any particular side.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say he's necessarily completely representative of the Naboo. He's definitely not in favor of the separatists.
Mm-hmm.
He's far removed because he's just a guy.
Yeah. He's
Mhm.
interested in doing the right thing, whatever that looks like.
Exactly. And so I think, that's definitely the argument I always make is at the bare minimum, understanding and recognizing his representation and importance in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, you can also enjoy him because he's funny. That's the point. He's supposed to be, like you said, the one we laugh at, the one that's a little less serious than everybody else at the family reunion.
Yeah. Star Wars cannot always be like Andor, where everything is dark and serious.
No. And nor should it. Exactly.
No.
You realize that Jar Jar is the marginalized guy. Representation is the word he used.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1999. Representation, the way that we talk about it today, was not around back then.
Mm-hmm.
And George is like, here's a character that you initially are going to be like, It's like, but once you get to know him, that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also very loyal. I think it was on the desk who said, you can always count on Jar Jar to be there with you.
Okay.
Now we come to little Anakin Skywalker, played by Jake Lloyd. I really hope Jake Lloyd one of these days gets to go to a celebration and gets to see how much people love him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There we get little Anakin, and he's not really anything like what we thought a young Vader would be. I think a lot of people are like, I want more of a dark, gritty kid. And I'm like, no, because the whole point is that people don't become villains. They're not born that way.
Exactly, unless they're Palpatine.
It's about their choices. It's about their choices.
Yeah.
And Anakin starts out as this really sweet, lovable, kind, compassionate, loyal, friendly kid, willing to do whatever it takes to help people he just met. Like and a couple hours before, he's like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes for you guys.
Right.
If he had been this dark, gritty, I see dead people type kid, I think that takes away some of the tragedy of it.
Absolutely.
But as you point out, when he comes back at the end of Return of the Jedi, I think in a way that's little Anakin brought back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that for me, this character is. I mean, I don't understand the criticism. I mean, yes, some of the line delivery is. Are you an angel? Is kind of a silly line, but. But, all the negativity toward him, but I want to put that aside.
Mm-hmm.
But as a character, I think he works very well because he is this pure, innocent kid who is, in a way, kind of wants to go on these great adventures. But even then, he's always willing to say, well, what can I do to help people?
Mm.
And we know where the story goes, but what he does in this film is he always leads with compassion.
Mm.
Thoughts on Little Annie?
I agree. I mean, I just think back to when the many times I first watched this. I didn't see future Darth Vader. I just saw Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to watch it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think.
Yeah, never go with the poster of the silhouette of Vader in the background.
Right.
But that's not who this kid is.
No, and I do love and appreciate the foreshadowing now, and obviously,
Oh yes.
He's always going to be the same character. But yeah, I just remember being wrapped up in just identifying with Anakin as a kid, this kid filled with wonder at the stuff around him, just, not really bothered by circumstances or trying not to be, and focusing instead on what he loves doing, building droids, racing, I don't know. It took a while.
Saying to Padme, you want to see my droid? He's just better.
Exactly.
He's just better, and he's like, hey, let's go.
I think it's definitely. I think it probably changed once episode 2 came out, and then obviously the bridge is being built to Darth Vader. But until he got closer, until he got influenced by many sources, I just saw a kid, and I think that's the important thing, because like you said, and what I think a lot of people do is they do see future Darth Vader, and so villains aren't born, they're made, blah blah blah. Yes, but also heroes aren't born either.
Good point.
And so, I think that's the cool duality of Anakin's meaning and story is, he's the inspiration and the rationalization of both villains and heroes. We're all one choice away from all of that.
Yeah, and but George Lucas says that's the bottom line of Star Wars is you can choose to be good or not. And to quote our good friend David Lynch, change your heart or die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, now we come to Queen Amidala. Young Natalie Portman as Padme, aka Queen Amidala. I'm going to confess, this is the character I have the hardest time with. Because I do find some of the stilted regal dialogue to be difficult to sit through, I think. And the reason I say I think is because I can sit through it, I just get a little like, ugh. Now, when she comes out of the queen shell, and it's just Padme, I think she's much more relatable. I think I understand the point that George Lucas was making. Though I do find that whatever they did to her voice as Queen Amidala, whether they dubbed her or digitally manipulated it, I'm not sure. I think if she had been allowed to speak with a more normal voice, I wouldn't have such a hard time sitting through the dialogue. But as a character, I love Padme. And obviously Clone Wars, Kat Taylor does so much to make that character more lovable. To the point that now she's one of people's favorites.
Right. And not just for her looks and everything.
But you see from the beginning with this character, she wants to avoid conflict at all costs. She wants to negotiate. She wants to reach out. She's not a pushover. She's not going to back down. And, if you test her, she's going to I mean,
Don't give me a hard time.
some of her great scenes with Qui-Gon Jinn. It's like, you Jedi are far too reckless. So the Queen won't approve. She's very like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of tells her off, but she holds her ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see from the beginning, this is the kind of character she is. And we love her for it. Even if I may have trouble with I will not condone a course of action that will lead us to war. It's like, emote a little, but otherwise I like the character.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. But as a character, I think I understand the point.
Yeah.
So just really quick, Amidala, what do you got?
I completely understand why you would have issues with the dialogue. Like, I think that's kind of why they added context in the Queen's Shadow.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That it makes make sense, but also, you didn't have to do all of that. I understand that it's for her protection. She had to blend in with Sabe some way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, he could have
Shout
done
out to a young Keira Knightley, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think she's one of those characters where it makes sense why she's queen. Like like you said, in those interactions with Qui-Gon, you see why she was elected queen.
Oh
Like
yeah.
like the power behind those words. You see, the lengths that she's willing to go for her people, but she is also just a teenage girl. And that's okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
she gets those moments to just be a person, and that's when she opens up to learning more about the community of Mos Espa. Like, I think that was
Oh
a
yeah,
really
that's true. Her decision to go out is like she wants to know.
absolutely. And
She's not a ruler who's just going to sit around and on the high horse.
exactly.
She wants to pull it, Harun al-Rashid, Arabian Nights, dressing as a commoner,
Mm-hmm.
to get an idea. This is what the world is really like.
Exactly.
And as we see later in Onwards, that's what she cares about.
Mm-hmm.
Is the average person. And then, of course, we have to come to my guy, Liam Neeson as Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, a character that we didn't know we needed.
Right.
A character full of infinite wisdom. One of his quotes is how I live my life. Focus to turn into reality. A character who, as a religious person, he is a role model for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, following the doctrine is great. And it's good. But dogma is not good.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes being open to new ideas and new things. And being guided by the Force the same way that a Christian might say, I'm guided by the Spirit. It's being willing to open yourself to that.
Mm-hmm.
And Qui-Gon is kind of the guy that I try to be the most like, I think.
Yeah.
And hopefully I succeed. I don't know.
I'd say
But I certainly want to be like him. So thoughts on our beloved Master Qui-Gon.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And, whether you're a faithful person or not, I think he's an important lesson of a character. I think even without religion, we can tend to rest on rigidity and black and white.
Good point.
And so I think in general, we can all benefit from being a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Considerate, a little more humble, and give a little bit more leeway to people and things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was actually just talking with a friend of mine earlier today about that concept of not generalizing and not this or that.
Yeah.
I think that's the meaning behind Obi-Wan's comment and the Jedi belief that for Sith it is good or bad. There's no in between.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Jedi unfortunately fall into that same dogma.
Yeah.
But the point being is that rigidity is bad. That bipolarism is bad. No one person is ever one thing.
Yeah.
And as much, to pull a quote from the Bible, obviously, but one anyone can live by is, treat others as you want to be treated. Allow others the grace you want. You wouldn't want to be typecast because of outward appearance or opinion or political belief. You wouldn't want to be typecast because of where you grew up or how you talk, or so why would we do that to anyone else? Qui-Gon is at the core that lesson. Additionally, he is also just the kind of guy and role model I think we should all strive to be. He finds time to be compassionate. He finds time to change. Obviously, nothing that happened on Tatooine was according to his plan. But by leaning into his feelings and his instincts that this is the right thing to do, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. I tell you, we've had an experience like that recently. My brother's moving to California, and then things didn't go right with the loan to get their house and stuff like that. But all of us in the family had received a feeling it's going to be all right. We didn't know how it was going to be all right. But we just sort of had to take that plunge like Qui-Gon does. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, but I'll just follow the Force. And that's kind of what we had to do. And it looks like it's all going to work out, but it was scary there for a little bit. And the Qui-Gon is the example of how to live by the Force and also how to be a little bit more open to different ideas. He's the opposite of Mace Windu.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to see in the Acolyte a bit. Without going into spoilers for those who haven't seen it, I think we'll see a similar dynamic in the Acolyte.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on the characters before we move on?
I was just going to say, to add on to that I think, obviously his emphasis on the living Force is very much what brings out what you're talking about. It's this idea of not only the big moment, but the right now moment too. The duality. It's everything I do right now affects the big story, but also the big story is not the most important thing as the right now.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan says, but Master Yoda said I should be mindful of the future.
Yep.
But not at the expense of the moment.
Exactly.
To live in the now. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I said, life lessons aplenty. Qui-Gon and in this whole movie.
Yeah, and what a rich tapestry of characters it is too. With George Lucas's life lessons contained in each character. It's really interesting.
Well, and that's why I've always touted the Phantom Menace is the most George Lucas Star Wars. It's the purest. If I don't know, if I was George Lucas and I did everything he did, I would hope the thing people pay attention to the most would be this, because I feel like if I were him, I put everything in it.
This is his thesis.
100%.
And for those of you listening who have not seen The Acolyte yet, no spoilers, but the first 2 episodes feel as close to George Lucas and the Phantom Menace as you could get.
Very much so.
Very much the rich tapestry of the galaxy and life lessons aplenty.
Yep.
But moment one. And a shirtless Yord. I mean, that's the cherry on top.
Exactly. Icing on the cake.
Ironing his robes.
I always wondered how that happened.
Yeah, I wondered about that. So really quickly, the screenplay, as we've talked about, is cheesy in some parts. But I don't think it's any more cheesy than what was in the original trilogy.
Agreed.
The original film has some pretty cheesy lines.
Mm-hmm.
But the trick is, the actors do a pretty good job delivering them.
Right.
And George Lucas is writing in this deliberate, like 1930s serial style. That's very, like, I'm reading the Conan the Barbarian stories right now.
Oh, cool.
I mean, talk about cheesy lines. I mean, really.
Very much so.
And so George Lucas is going for that. And so really quick, we won't, I mean, I'll just say a few words and then we'll move on. But don't judge the screenplay on a critical, artsy level. That's not what this is trying to be.
No.
This is being good old-fashioned, goofy, ridiculous fun with silly one-liners, and also, even though you get lines like, "Are you an angel?" and other lines that are kind of, on the other end, you get your focus determines your reality.
Exactly.
One of the most profound lines I think ever written.
Mm-hmm.
The Star Wars has always been a mixed bag.
Yeah, like life.
Of writing style, and that's fine. Now we come to the themes.
Mm.
Now, because we're pressed for time, we could spend an entire week nonstop talking about the themes here. But we've already kind of addressed it, the theme of symbiosis.
Mm.
George is telling us, hey, what you do affects other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who casts a vote to ostracize queer people, even though it's one person, that vote is going to hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
One person who burns a Book of Mormon to get back at Mormons. Not members of my church. I wouldn't use the word Mormon. Even though it's one person doing a stupid thing, that's going to hurt somebody.
Mm.
So what it really comes down to is every action, even if they're smaller than that, even just saying something nice to somebody, or saying something mean to somebody, or honking at somebody, those little actions, even if it's one dumb action by one dumb person, or one good person, it's going to hurt somebody, or help somebody, depending on the situation. And that's really what George is saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's what happens to one of you will affect the other.
Yep.
And that is maybe one of the most powerful ideas in Star Wars. And as I said, it's George Lucas's thesis
Mm-hmm.
on you can do good or bad, and it's going to affect somebody.
Yep.
So really quick, what do you think about the themes, particularly of symbiosis, in this film? Yeah.
Mm. I mean, like, it is definitely one of the most important parts of the story that goes into the rest of the prequels as well. Like, it's like you said, it's so prominent in almost every, little bit. The rule of two going over for everything. And it is easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but like these are movies that I think it doesn't hurt to study them while also having a little bit of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll never poo-poo people who like to study them as art, because it is art and it deserves to be studied.
Yeah.
But also, chillax.
Don't go into this with the same lens you would take into like 8.5, the great Italian art film.
Yeah.
It's the wrong kind of lens to look at this movie in.
Exactly.
And also, as our friend Carl Weathers would say, be good to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That's really what the biggest theme here is. And there are many, many more, and we may have to talk about that on another podcast. On another episode, we may have to do a whole episode on themes. Now we come to the music. What can we say about the music that has not already been said? This, in my opinion, is George Lucas's. I was going to say George Lucas. Is George Lucas's partner John Williams. His buddy John Williams. This is John Williams' greatest score, in my opinion.
It's definitely way up there.
Duel of the Fates may be the greatest piece of music written for a movie.
Oh, yeah.
And there are just so many shades and layers and big triumphant themes. The more emotional themes, even Anakin's theme, that at the end, as a Darth Vader Imperial March sound on the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant use of music, and also the music that really fits each world. We go to 3 planets here, and the music that we hear gives us a sense of what these worlds are like.
Mm.
Because so much has been said about John Williams' score, in a nutshell, what do you think of this amazing score?
I mean, I agree. I think it's, for me, my favorite, and I think it's definitely one of the best. Just because like a lot of things, I think time has helped everyone understand how to do their jobs better when making Star Wars, and the Phantom Menace and the prequels are very, very strong in that category, because music is less of a filler and it's more of a character of itself.
Good point. Star Wars is always, the music has never just been background music.
Oh yeah,
right. And so obviously, episode 1 introduces a few themes that continue to get used and played off of in the prequels, and so that it feels like it is that same shared world, just like there are similarities in the originals and similarities in the sequels. So they each feel like their own period, their own story, and the music is its own character in each. But John Williams, being brilliant, obviously makes it all work.
absolutely.
I mean, he pulls out all the stops. This is like a big score. The original trilogy had big scores. This raises it to an even bigger level.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly when you add the whole prophecy and mythic elements of the story.
Right.
That ratcheted up to an epic level.
Mm-hmm.
And the music follows suit in that regard. And then we go to our last category, the spectacle. This movie, as George Lucas likes to do, changed cinema completely. Introducing CGI in a way that had never been used.
Yeah.
Introducing motion capture, which, look at where it played now. I mean, Gollum, Caesar, Thanos.
Yeah.
The list just goes on, of incredible performances given through performance capture, and all thanks to George.
Mm-hmm.
Visually, I think it's still stunning. I mean, maybe some of the CGI looks a little dated, but it still has there's a charm to it, I think.
Oh yeah, you barely
The
know.
fact that it is slightly dated is charming. And obviously, being able to create a much larger palette of the worlds and the space battles and the going to these different planets and getting a huge view of them. Pod race, of course, great use of CG there. It really was the dawn of the new era in film.
Mm.
Even though The Matrix got all the love at the Oscars that year, which it's got great visual effects, it does.
Yeah.
But it's
Phantom
not
Menace changed the game.
Oh, absolutely.
And Phantom Menace, I think, has the most effect on the future of cinema. George would later film a movie on digital in 2002 when nobody was doing that, and now they all do it. So anyhow, as we conclude the spectacle of the Phantom Menace, what do you got?
It does so much to like not just watch the movie, but go back and watch like commercials and TV spots and all that stuff about, this is a new Star Wars story and how big of a deal that they were making it. Like we've mentioned them before, but Jerry and Scotty did a great series where they went through all of these TV spots.
Oh,
And all
yes. That's what we just talked about, yeah.
Like there was so much
Marcelant.
Like it was truly insane the amount of work that went into this movie for it to be treated meanly for a little bit too long. But I think The Phantom Menace came out at a time where we needed a movie about hope and love and how everything's going to be okay. And it was unfortunately met with a cynical audience for a long time until, we got to a point where we could re-interact with the feeling of hope.
Those jokes on Community and Parks and Rec have not aged well.
No.
The Phantom Menace jokes.
No. And people are still making those jokes, and to them I say, grow up. It's one of those things, like, you cannot deny while watching that movie. It makes you feel something. This is an incredible story that has survived this long, and finally the fans that grew up with it and loved it from the beginning are louder than the fans that were being jerks in internet forums. And I think that's part of the spectacle, is the longevity of the movie, not just as a movie itself, but as a sensation.
And I'll bet you anything, in 20 years it'll be the same about the sequels.
I will do it myself.
Yeah, no, it is a turning point in cinema. This movie is. And you're right. Part of that spectacle is how it is endured. And part of that spectacle is a movie about choices. About choosing to do the good thing. Even when it's not the easiest thing to do. And standing up for what's right, even when that's not the easiest thing to do.
Absolutely.
So that, unfortunately, friends, brings us to the end of our amazing review. Let's just say the tone of this review is quite different than the last one I did. Because I had yet to embrace the philosophy of change your heart or die. But that brings us to the end. And what a movie this is. It's joy. It's joy. It's absolutely joy. It is joy incarnate. And as we said, this is the most George that Star Wars has ever been.
Absolutely.
And as I said about The Acolyte, I am so glad that Leslie Headland is embracing that philosophy. And making it colorful and weird and wild. And adventurous and Jedi, and some Jedi are dogmatic and some are not, Yeah, I'm all about the Soul Squad. That's me.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, they reveal some interesting things down the road. But regardless, visually, and just in terms of vibes, Acolyte is the most like Phantom Menace. I think that we've seen in Star Wars since then. So, I guess our final thoughts would be, for me, this movie is joy.
Absolutely.
Just absolute joy. Do you have any final thoughts about this film before we end?
Just that I agree with you. I mean, it's as much something that I put on because it makes me feel good, but also it makes me have a different kind of perspective on people and life. And, I think it's what art is supposed to be. It's supposed to be enjoyable, but also thought provoking, challenging, but also comforting. I think it's something that is already by a lot of people looked at as a meaningful moment in not only film history, but history in general. But I think it will only continue and grow to be even more meaningful.
Absolutely.
Well, I give you a 3 stars. They were not very well said. Well, where can the good people find you?
On the internets, I mostly hang out on Twitter at Duke Trooper 117. I'm also on Instagram at that. That's where I'll post pictures of my various little projects with little plastic peoples that I enjoy, Star Wars and otherwise.
And proudly wearing a Rise of Skywalker shirt. Thank you.
Exactly, definitely, and yeah, if you like anything I've said, then that's all I do all the time. If you don't like it, don't follow, because that's all it is.
Find something somewhere else, buddy.
And let's say the two of you are like the best follows on Twitter.
Aw, thank you.
Boop, where can we find you?
You can find me at Boopenheim, MEW on Twitter.
Talking about Dracula.
Talking about Dracula, mainly. Also, just info dumping constantly about my feelings on whatever Star Trek we're watching at the moment. Today.
Oh, yes.
Movies.
Filling me with so much joy.
Yeah, but we're still going through our watch through of Deep Space Nine, and boy howdy, I have a feeling I'm gonna cry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would be very happy to have you guys on to talk about the show as a whole when you're done with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I won't give away anything, but you're in for some good stuff.
Oh yeah.
We're looking forward to it.
All right. Well, everyone, you know where to find me. And we don't have the video on, but in case anyone is wondering, yes, I do have the Rise of Skywalker poster in my room, and I am proud of it.
Heck yeah.
Because just like this movie, I'm proud of it.
There you go.
Anyhow, well, thank you guys. I cannot thank you enough for joining me today.
Always a pleasure.
I mean, what a time it is to celebrate this amazing movie.
Absolutely.
And for it to finally get the reception that it deserves, I think.
100%.
All right, everyone. My name is Brendan Marr, that noisy hearings my ventilator. Thank you for tuning in to The Guests Awaken, presented by Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. I usually end by saying, may the Force be with you. But today I'll end with saying, change your heart or die.